All right, welcome everybody. If you've tuned in to Go Go Astros or to Lone Star Yell Fight, you're not in the wrong place. You're in the right place. We have a new show. Andy and I are together, going to be creating something a little bit different that will both cover the Astros and the Longhorns and the Aggies and football and also some random stuff. We don't have a name to the show yet, which is why we're still using the Go Go Astros. Is that your Ted Lasso?
I believe
Oh my God, I have my own little. He's in my drawer. I have my own Ted Lasso.
this was my example. This is my example today of random stuff. You said baseball.
Right.
You said football.
And you know
Yeah,
what? What's really enough is I have a stormtrooper dressed for Halloween. That's
I'm glad we can have show and tell. Maybe that's the name of the show.
really glad we can. But yeah, you're gonna be hearing sports, Texas sports, Longhorn stuff, Aggie stuff. I guess we'll even do some NFL, but it's all gonna be fun. It's all gonna be all in one spot. But
I think this
first
is a
of all,
really sad way for you to avoid having to talk about basketball soon. Just
yeah, I
changing the
don't.
nature of two shows just so we don't have to talk about basketball.
It's like we're not gonna rank our favorite episodes of Happy Days just to get through basketball season.
That one where he's got a shark and he does water ski stuff, I like that one.
I told my film students, I said, sometimes I think this class has jumped the shark, and they all looked at me like a monkey doing a math problem.
It's fair.
But they love the movie Clue, and they are loving the movie Airplane. So the future generation has to be in a good spot.
Well, your mileage may vary. I've got two that I'm related to, and I'm not thrilled with them right now. But hey, it's a thing.
It's a thing. Yes, talk about random stuff. Hey, so we will start with the Astros. Of course, there was an offer made, and of course, Twitter or X went nuts because they don't know how negotiations work. But the Astros did offer Bregman what I thought honestly was more than I would have thought of an initial offer would have been. I think it was it 5 or 6 years, but 156 million.
What
Um,
what McTaggart reported yesterday was 6 years, 156, which
which is
is
about
very much in line
34
with
off of what he thinks he's going to get.
yeah, but very much in line with what Matt Chapman got. So if they said that's the floor, well, that's where we started.
Right. And the idea being it's a negotiation. I think the Astros have said they want to stay engaged, but I think it's also smart for the Astros to say, but we're not just going to sit here and write a blank check. We're going to have other backup plans. But I mean, does this make you feel any better about a reunion of the Astros? And on top of that, it seems like the rest of the league has cooled on interest when it comes to because now I'm seeing like Willie Adames as being the first choice at third base free agent wise, which
Well,
feels weird to me.
because Willie hit what 37 home runs last year.
Okay.
So I mean that's ultimately it. He didn't have 2 months where he took baseball off, but not from attendance, just from actually performing.
Bregman, we'll pay you 7 years if you actually play for 7 years.
Yeah, I'm of two minds of the whole contract thing. I am enthused that they went to six because all the narratives of Crane won't go past five for free. He won't cover more than five free agent years. All the things we've heard,
Right.
which have been valid, may not be true anymore. There may be situations where we can go past that. So I'm glad that Dana Brown, Jim Crane, whoever's involved in that decision, realize the realities of the situation. That it's not that we have a top ranked farm system where we can just plug and play.
Sure.
We don't even have a random guy that we could just plug and play. Shea Whitcomb is not that guy.
No.
The other side of that is that and I realize that the Astros fan base, we have been spoiled by the last
Yeah.
7, 8 years,
Mhm.
kind of ridiculously so. I still go back to what Jeff Luhnow said was his goal, and I guess Jim Crane said the same thing, was to have an organization like the St. Louis Cardinals, who at that time were make a playoff contender every year. And once you get in the playoffs, whatever happens, happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot more fun to make the playoffs and win series and win the World Series, which we got to do twice. But I don't want to get away from that. I think we're in a weird spot in that, and I know our one or two viewers are going to take issue with this. There was a penalty for the cheating scandal. There was a penalty for that. It was losing 4 draft picks. And the reason we have no depth in AAA right now, or AA, is that we lost 4 top draft picks. We lost 2 first rounders and 2 second rounders. You don't have those guys to develop. And yeah, it's a crapshoot who you develop in the minors, one way or the other. But you need to have bodies, and you need to have bodies that have a high capacity for playing well. And potentially who you draft in the first round and the second round are those guys. Um, we get very bogged down as Astros fans about, well, Chas McCormick did. Chas McCormick was like a 28th round pick when he was picked. They don't even have the round of the draft that he
Right.
was picked in anymore.
And if you get no
Um,
more from Chas McCormick, it's still been a win. Like if you get nothing more
right,
going forward, it's been a win.
but that's not normal. And I
Yeah.
think there's this belief in our among some of our fan base that, well, Shea Whitcomb can come up and play third. He'll just figure it out. There's a certain just talent threshold that Bregman is far above versus what we have in the minors this year, next year, and probably 3 years from now. So I'm glad that we've altered. I wish we had better options in the minor leagues so we had a stronger negotiating place. Ultimately, it's not my money. I don't care. I would like to see Alex Bregman resign. I don't want to see Alex Bregman resign at the expense of getting a first baseman who is at least major league average, getting a left-handed bat in the outfield, and potentially getting another starting pitcher. And that's probably where I'm ranking, those needs.
Sure.
Third base is obviously first right now, but the Astros have a lot of holes, and we're about to commit a lot of that to one guy, at least for a year, because we have a lot of payroll coming off the books for next year,
Yeah.
which gives us a
For all the talk about Abreu and
little more
Montero,
flexibility.
those impacts are gone after this season. Um, yeah, one of the things that was worrying me, like we talked about this when the beginning of the run was, I didn't want to get into these contracts where you're paying 7, 8 year contracts, and for years 6 through 8, you're paying a guy for what he did through 1 through 5. That's the one thing that worries me about Bregman is he does. I wouldn't say he's injury prone, but he's been hurt. You know what I mean. He can start. He does have cold starts. I do think he brings intangibles that are hard to measure to all my analytically driven friends who say don't worry about keeping him because he will get old. Like I think that you can't look at all the pitchers giving him credit for improving this year and not take it for at face value for that being a thing that happens. How many other teams have a third baseman that can do that?
You know what I'm tired of, Jim? I'm tired of the Dodgers being the creative ones in Major League Baseball from a contract standpoint. So what
Yeah.
I would do, pay Bregman for 5 years, 6 years as a player, give him another 2 years as a pitching coach, but just make that like periodic throughout the 6 year contract. That way you can justify the money. Some of it's not payroll, and then tell Major League Baseball we're not paying taxes on that amount. Ha, he's
Huh.
a coach.
Well, but that you bring up a good point too, because the easy narrative of, well, the Dodgers are evil because they have the most money and they spend it. And look, that's fact. And people that say that that's not the case, that think that the Kansas City Royals and the Dodgers can spend equally, they're idiots and they're hiding, they're putting their head in the sand. But the Dodgers have also somehow managed to do this without depleting their farm system, and by using the deferrals the way they're doing, they are going to keep putting a dominant. I fully expect Soto to be a Dodger this year, frankly. And
I don't know if I'd go so far as the Soto thing, but I think if you're interested in finding creative ways to win baseball games, and a lot of Astros fans were really happy when we really adopted analytics a long time before a lot of other major league teams did. We started working the shift defensively because it gave us the best chance to win, and that was, even though it sounds really simple and it's been around in baseball forever, it's something that you went outside the box of what was happening in the norm and you won games with it. That got taken away, but that's a
won
whole
so many
different
games that
conversation.
in Major League Baseball got rid of it because the rest of the league couldn't or wouldn't keep up.
Yeah, so it becomes this issue of I don't have any issue with the Dodgers being as creative as they can within the rules to field the team they want to field. And if that means they end up with Otani, which they did, if that means they end up with Freddie Freeman, which they did, if that means they figure out a way to get Juan Soto or somebody else of a similar caliber on their roster and live within the rules that are set, good for them. I think other teams should be willing to do that. I also understand in the Astros situation why Jim Crane doesn't want to have a payroll that extends out for 30 years.
Right. Especially when you factor the one thing that think people don't realize is the Dodgers may be one thing, but when you have a bunch of dead contract, you're affecting your ability to resell the team, like to sell the team. And that's the
Yeah.
other thing too, is for as much as I do think Jim Crane is one of the rare owners in baseball that does want to win, it's still an investment. And I don't think any of us like to me, it rings so hollow when people are literally asking him to make a potentially bad investment. You and I would not intentionally do that. Like, why would we expect someone else. And this is the owner who I think realizes that the best investment is winning. You know,
It's a home. I mean, it's a home equity loan. It's great until you try to sell the house, and then you have two loans to pay off. And maybe it all works out for you. Maybe a lien is a better example. But at some point, you have to pay that bill. I don't think that affects the Dodgers because I don't think anybody in the ownership group has any plans of selling that franchise at any point.
and it's got a
Um, I
brand like the Cowboys or the Yankees where you're going to
yeah,
make that money back. Right.
I can't say that for Jim Crane. I couldn't say that for whoever owns the Royals or whoever owns the Cincinnati Reds, because eventually those teams will probably change hands. You've got 4 or 5 teams that are safe from that standpoint. The Yankees are never going to leave the family that owns them right now. The Mets could, they have in the past, but that guy's probably in it for a while. The Red Sox are probably in a similar situation, although they've changed hands. So there's just a handful of teams that don't have to worry about dead money 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, because it's going to affect how their ability to make money off their asset happens in the future, or whoever owns the team at that point has that burden to deal with. Now, inflation being what it is, real dollars being what they are, maybe it ends up being a wash, but it's still something you have to deal with when you're still paying Otani $1 billion in 2035, and somebody's interested in buying part of the team.
Yeah. Um, no, I totally agree. And I just wish people would recognize and you're starting to see it. Um, it got really bad when the Dodgers signed Snell, and it became like, oh, go cry poor somewhere else. Like it felt almost very our political system, where you had people on the coasts yelling at the people in the middle of America that the reality you're living in isn't the reality you're living in, and just suck it up and drive on. When I think both things can be true. I do think that ownership like the Pirates have some explaining to do because they're not trying to win. But I think there are teams in the middle of the country that legitimately are trying to win and just aren't because they cannot keep up. And we've said this, Andy, we've said this forever on all the shows we've done. If you want baseball to succeed, you have to adopt an NFL league first approach, not a confederation of 30 teams in which 4 of them matter.
No, the Major League Baseball is a social club made up of 30 ownership groups who have horses that they like. That's we're going to let these horses play together, but I don't really care if your horse dies or not because my horse is fine. That's the mentality of the Major League owner. And the current commissioner loves that mentality. That's why he's in place, because he's going to do nothing to challenge that mentality. Yeah, if you want um, God, I've lost the name. The Hank Azaria show that was
Oh,
on just
Brockmeyer.
recently.
Brockmeyer. Yeah.
Brockmeyer. If you want a picture of what Major League Baseball is going to look like in probably about 20 years, watch the last season of Brockmeyer. Not in front of your mother, because that would be uncomfortable, but there's a lot going on in that show. But it'll still be around, but it'll probably look different, and it'll probably have lower attendance, and it'll probably be really expensive ticket prices. And the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Red Sox, maybe the Cubs and the Mets are still going to be the teams that have the most money to spend because they're situated in great positions. Um, it's it could be addressed. It should be addressed. I have no faith that it will ever be addressed.
Well, yeah, and obviously when we get back next week, on Tuesday or Friday, whenever we do this show again, because that's how loose we're playing it. I think we're doing 2 episodes a week, but we'll talk. But hopefully we'll figure it out. I do feel pretty bullish still on Bregman being an Astro.
Yeah, I think that all things being equal, he would prefer to be there. This isn't a George Springer situation where the Astros aren't going to get any opportunity to continue to negotiate. It's a good faith offer. It is certainly larger than they've done for any other player. Even the $5 million, or what is it, $5 million over they offered Altuve. So there is a significance to offering somebody more money than you've offered Jose Altuve. Um, I think it works out in the wash unless somebody comes out of nowhere and gives him the $200 million. Because I don't think the Astros get. I don't think the Astros completely bridge that extra 34 million.
No, I can see the Astros just, I can see them getting about 170, 175, and then that being, and honestly, if they get to 170, 175 and Bregman still says no, then good luck. And we will, hopefully make the team a little bit better by increasing in the aggregate all the other three positions.
No, we're gonna have Jorge Polanco and his, because all teams pick up former Mariners and do well.
All right,
It's
let's go
that
ahead.
winning culture that former Mariners bring to all of their new situations.
Well, of course it is. Seattle is well, they don't have a lot of
Known for
sun
champions. Known for champions.
championships. All right, so I want to talk a little Aggie football. Connor Wigman has transferred. Um, we both talked
He's
about
entered the portal.
is in
He
the
hasn't
portal,
had.
yeah. Overall, just thoughts on his legacy because I agree. We had talked a little bit about how like we really felt like his post was pretty classy about leaving.
Yeah, and I do say that recognizing that the athletic department writes a lot of those posts for the players, or at least helps them out greatly. First of all, congratulations on your win. I think that A&M fans got to wake up to the reality that Texas plays probably the best defense in college football this year. If not the best, it's a short roll call of the teams that are in that group. Um, we just couldn't muster enough offense, and you would think that blocking a punt and getting the ball on the 10-yard line and having it at 4th and 1 from the 3 twice in the game would mean you could score more than 7 defensive points. But no, that was not us. Um, this was a very good defense taking advantage of an offense that just was not ready to play that night for a number of reasons. So hats off to you guys. But whatever offense we could muster, at least between the 20s, was due to Marcel Reed. Marcel Reed, I think, even with the interception he threw, even though it was a very frustrating night, he had a decent night for a redshirt freshman playing against a very good defense. And because he's been given the reins, because he has looked better at times than Connor Wegman has looked, Connor's headed off to greener pastures, or at least different pastures. And kind of good luck to him. There's no animosity, and I think that would change for the fan base if he, for instance, is playing for Texas next year, or if he picks an SEC school. I don't know
Sure.
that I don't think his menu from a selection standpoint is going to be an SEC school. Because frankly, he just hasn't performed expectations. And whether that's injuries, whether that's mental game, whether that's not being a fit of the offense, I think there's a number of factors there. But I think he can go someplace and be successful. And I hope that he does,
Sure.
because from all accounts, he's a good kid, was an ambassador for the school and said all the right things on his way out the door. And even though he was clearly frustrated with his role this year, there was no negativity. There was no pouting on the sidelines. And don't follow him around all day, so I can't, pretend that I know what happened there. Maybe he was a real pisser at HEB or Brookshire Brothers. Um, but on the sideline during the games, when Reed would come off the field, even up to the Texas game, Wegman was there. He was cheering him on. He was talking about things he was seeing, helping out the player who had ostensibly taken his place to play better. I think he's a consummate teammate, and again, I wish him well wherever he's going to be. I think you're looking at somebody, and I haven't looked at these quarterback situations, but probably a Big Ten school. Probably a Big Ten school that doesn't need him to be a running quarterback. Probably
Yeah.
a school that's has a good offensive line that he can be a true drop back passer, because while he can scramble, that's his strength. And you saw the difference between him and Ewers. And Ewers, I think most Texas fans would have told me, didn't have a great game against A&M, because A&M also plays defense a little bit.
Yeah,
Um,
and they're going to look at two plays for that. One of which they're going to give him the fault on. I, I first thought that interception was the worst interception I'd ever seen. I didn't realize the ball was tipped. And then, I kind of agree with Herb Street. You can make the argument that the fumble shouldn't have counted because he had started to slide. But that's what they're going to do is they're going to look at those two plays as opposed to the fact that he was actually dropping dimes throughout the first half and making some
yeah,
beautiful throws.
but I think and there's a difference in defensive philosophies between the two teams from what I mean, if you were just looking at that game, A&M very much is playing a bend don't break type offense. So
Yeah,
Texas got a lot of drives down into the red zone and then stalled out on several of them, especially in the second half. That's the design of the defense.
sure.
Texas plays a different defense. So I think Ewers didn't have a great game, but his experience, the level of play that he's at, comes with being a 3-year starter. I guess now a 4-year starter. Wegman just didn't have that experience, and for whatever reason, he's not going to get that level of experience at A&M. And I think most of it has to do with the system. But again, I hope that he goes to the
See,
Big
I'd like
Ten.
him to see him go some like Big Ten or even like I mean, it seems like SMU has become the home for wayward quarterbacks where they can go and really inflate their numbers and still get a chance to get drafted. Because if you're Connor Wigman, that's now like even more importantly now is like, where can I go to make sure I can put up the numbers to play at the
Sure.
next level? So I do think he's got next level talent.
I mean, realistically, if he could run a little bit more and was comfortable running a little bit more, I think having a reclamation project like Oregon had with Bo Nix 2 years ago, it would line up real similar to what Connor's skill set is. It remains to be seen, if it's an ACC team or a Big Ten team that predominantly runs the ball, has a good run offense that he can complement, or even a Big 12 team that he'll be able to put up stats in. I don't think he plays fast enough to play in the SEC week in, week out. And I think his decision making just hasn't gotten better for whatever reason.
I want to go to Texas, Georgia. And I want to start by, look, it's not an excuse. I'm not a super big excuse things, but I don't think you can take a lot from that first Texas, Georgia game because it was weird. Both teams turning the ball over. And I think Georgia had touchdown drives that began on the Texas 20, the Texas 35, and the Texas 40. Like, it wasn't like they were driving the ball all over the field. It's just both teams were turning them over. Texas was turning them over deeper in their own end than Georgia was. So I don't know that you can look at that and say, that you're going to see a repeat of this game. For as much as I had no confidence in Texas beating A&M, I think I have a lot of confidence in Texas' ability to beat Georgia. I think that Texas is healthier. I think Georgia's defense, if you can run a little bit, has a pretty subpar back end, and all they pretty much can do with any degree of reliability is run the football. And I don't know that Texas can be ran on right now. Thoughts?
I will say different from what you guys faced in October with Georgia. Carson Beck is playing better now than he was then. He had a really rough spot, especially after the few weeks after playing you guys, where he was
Three
just
games in a row with 3 turnovers each, right?
just turnover machine. And he's cleaned that up somewhat. I think it's going to be a tighter game. This is whatever you want to say about neutral field. This is a home game for Georgia. It always is a home game for Georgia because it's in Atlanta. It's an hour away from, or hour and a half away from Athens.
How much does that
So
matter though when you're talking about a fan base like Texas that is hungry and can afford to go wherever? Because it's not like they're not going to just sell Texas tickets, right? I'm assuming the allotment's pretty even to start out.
right, but it's the rest of the tickets that have already been purchased by Georgia fans last July.
Yeah. But how many is that really?
Uh,
Like I see it being 60, 40
I would
Georgia
I would
fans.
I
I
would
don't think
guess
it's
no
going to
matter
be
how well
80,
you
10.
travel, you're 2/3, 1/3. I think
See,
it's
I think it's going to
60
be
at
closer to
Georgia.
50-50 than that. I think it'll be like 60-40.
We'll see. And you guys may be really excited about it. The issue with the championship games is you don't know you're in it until you're in it, especially this time.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how many Texas fans decided that after paying $1,200 to go to College Station, I'm
Oh
now
my
going to pay
God.
$3,000 to go to Atlanta. Um, so there is a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Certainly, you have rich alumni. I'm sure they will, blow their money because all good things are going to happen for billionaires for the next 4 years. Um,
Yes.
So I mean, I just
And
I,
Bitcoin.
it it'll be an interesting factor to watch. I don't think it's a deal breaker that Georgia is going to be basically playing a home game, even if they are. Um, Georgia beat you guys at home. Again, I don't know that how much that matters. I think it's a factor. I think the bigger factor is if Carson Beck plays to his capability, you have a bigger fight on your hands than if he doesn't. And that seems like a very obvious statement on the surface level, but I don't think Georgia can game plan around you guys turning the ball over 3 times, 4 times in a
Yeah.
game and having a lot of short fields to score on. I also think Texas's defense is playing much better in November than they were playing in October. So I think you guys are peaking at the right time, to use a little baseball term. For at least for this game. Lord knows what happens with a 2-3 week layoff before your first round playoff game. Um, but at least for the context
We'll have
of
a bye,
this
but whatever.
Saturday, okay,
I
then
wanted
3 weeks.
to, but to that
But yeah,
point,
I think it's going to be a better game, certainly than what happened last weekend. But I think Kirby Smart is a very good coach. Kirby Smart will have his team ready to play. Georgia tends to play well in that game, not last year, notwithstanding. So, well, it'll be a very interesting match. I have kind of resigned myself to Texas winning just because that's what you do historically. Your first year in the league, you win the league, and last year in the league, you win the league.
how awesome is
Congrats.
that? That's pretty cool.
Although I did go check, that's not exactly true. Baylor and OU tied for the first Southwest Conference championship. That
Really?
was the one
So
year
so
Oklahoma
really the
won the
streak
Southwest
is the
Conference.
last Southwest Conference, first Big
It's
12,
the
last Big 12. Okay.
Yeah.
I
So
wanted
you
to
did not win the first Southwest Conference championship, but Baylor had to abdicate their share because they were cheating. Because I don't think they were raping anybody, or at least
well,
that's not what they got
but
accused
that's a
of. They
bad juju
probably
because
were raping people.
Baptists don't have reconciliation. Like, we're Catholic. We can just
They have a
sorry.
personal relationship with the Jeebus, and
Do they really?
it does
Um,
not matter what they do. It's just the faith. That's
one of
the
the things I do think, though, I think Texas has better personnel across the board than Georgia. But I wanted to ask about one specific thing. We had joked before the Aggie Longhorn game about how, like, don't worry, there's nothing being saved for this game. And then the first thing you see is in a short yardage situation, here comes Arch Manning, which I did not think would happen. I don't know if you thought that was a possibility, but if you take that they've already exposed Arch Manning to playing in that game, and then you look at how bad Georgia's defense has been against running quarterbacks, particularly Georgia Tech, and then the game before. I mean, even UMass rushed for like 200 yards against Georgia. Do you feel like with Texas's new running game and a running quarterback option, does that add a little bit of a edge into Texas's direction?
Yeah. I think that you understand how to use James Wisner better. I think Georgia presents a different problem because their linebacking core is better than what you faced last week. So the run game may not. I don't know that Wisner is going to be pushing 200 yards this week.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he will, but I
But if
think
he
it's
gets
more likely.
150 on 25 carries, that might do it.
Yeah, but I think it's more likely that Wisner gets close to 100, or your running game generates 150 to 175, but your intermediate passing game is better because yours has time to throw. Um, I think that's the issue. He's going to be another week healthier, hopefully, from his ankle, which is the whole reason we saw Arch Manning. I don't think there was a design to get Arch Manning into the game to expose him to the crowd. I think that was more of a recognition that despite the fact that Ewers ran for 26 yards like a wounded deer down the line, because
Yeah.
evidently we have nobody in the secondary who can run any faster, um, that Ewers wasn't going to be a runner in those tight field situations. And Manning does bring that extra dimension.
And that's what I'm saying, Joe. But take his
And I
dimension
think
plus
that,
the fact that Georgia has been susceptible to the quarterback run. I mean, all Georgia Tech's entire offense was the quarterback run, and they went to 8 overtimes. Not really 8 overtimes. It's a bunch of bullshit when most of the overtimes now are just 2 point conversions. I don't think you get to say that they've had more. It was a more exciting game than A&M LSU. No, that was like 7 real overtimes, not 7 bullshit overtimes.
well, you can blame the NCAA for fixing a problem that doesn't exist. It's so easy to do overtime if you don't want to do sudden death. It's so easy. Just keep backing the ball up. So you start off at the 25, both teams score great. Now the next possession's from the 35, both teams score great. Now you're at the 45. Eventually, one of these teams is going to be out of field goal range or not be able to complete a half a field drive. That's that would fix it. No, let's just go to 2 point conversions and make the worst part of offensive football a premier part of winning a football game.
There's nothing like that contracted field that's so
Oh yeah, let's have everybody clumped up within 2 yards of each other and hope somebody breaks free.
right. Right, and that's what Georgia actually ended up having. And
But
honestly, it's
why
how
would you
A&M
expect
lost. Yeah,
the NCAA to fix anything in a way that makes sense?
we wouldn't. Do you have a call on the Texas Georgia game at this point?
I've already said I think Texas wins because historically they're going to win because that's what they do. They're going to. It's the first year in a new league. Fucking
All right,
win.
so you're going with the my fallback of A&M's going to win because God hates me excuse. Is that what it is?
I'm gonna go with 4th and 3, and we're gonna let a tight end just run down the field free, Mac Brown, and beat Nebraska. Hadn't done that all game, didn't do that anytime after that, but this one play.
That was it's funny. I think that was Jessica's freshman year. I mean, imagine that though, that being your freshman year of college. Like, oh, this is what it's like. This is pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, especially since you had been kind of I'm not picking, but kind of wandering in the
Yeah.
desert for, a decade before that.
Well,
Because yes,
we
Southwest
talked the
Conference.
last week that A&M had won like 10 of 12 going into Mac
Yeah.
Brown's era. I mean, for as much as there is a wide discrepancy of like the overall record, and we can obviously pick about when we want to start counting wins, the fact of the matter is for 12 years, A&M dominated University of Texas, and there was no
Well, our,
that.
our standard answer is 1973 with scholarship limitations being put in place, but um,
I've also
that's
seen desegregation was a reason
as
why.
an A&M fan, I have to just go with the company line as well. Since in my lifetime, we're either tied or y'all are up by one. But that's more of a rivalry game than the 50s and the 60s would have been up until like basically from World War II to 1975. That's where the gap came from.
Yeah, but they still
Um,
count those wins though.
I'm not disparaging. I just ultimately I don't know how much historical record matters when the game has changed so much. It's a not if we had it, we'd be bragging all over it. So don't
Sure. Yeah.
get me wrong, but I don't know that what happened in 1922 with Grandpappy Stevens running the Triple T um, affects what happens in 2025. I just
No.
don't. But
Um,
Grandpappy Stevens was a great man, and we have named a street after him in front of the rectory, or I mean something,
oh,
I'm
that's a
sure.
real person?
No, but it
Okay.
could be because why wouldn't that be his name?
I was
Well, we
like,
called him
wow.
Grandpappy because he took in a bunch of orphans, as was the time.
Your Aggie knowledge is encyclopedic. If that's, I was like, wow, that's a real guy.
No,
Um,
everybody's got a Grandpappy Stevens.
I have two more topics, one random, one not. Look, I think it's irritating that Bevo can't go to the game, but Uga can, and I understand. Like, and people want to say it's because Bevo almost ran Uga over last time, and that's not it. It's about, according to the Mercedes-Benz Dome, that it's got everything to do with space and allotment, and they probably don't want a large cow shitting all over their field. However,
Well, I think their official excuse is the dimensions of the sideline don't preclude the necessary pin or
space,
restraints that you
right?
would have to have for an animal. The same way I would expect the buffalo from Colorado would not be
Sure.
able to go there. I don't think it's unique to Texas. Does it suck for your fans who want to see your drugged out steer attending a football game? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, though, if we were to change it to the University of Texas Fighting German Shepherds, I'd be okay with that too. That'd be pretty sweet, actually.
I mean, ultimately, a dog's easier to travel with than
Yeah,
a 3,000 pound steer.
it is.
So
I did rewatch
I,
that clip
I
though,
get
and
it. It sucks. I also think this is going to be one of the random reasons that Texas will politic to have the championship game moved at some point closer to Texas.
well, if what
And
I
by
predict
and by closer to Texas, I mean in Cowboy
Dallas,
Stadium.
yeah. See, I actually believe if what I think comes to pass, where this league eventually does run through Texas and Texas A&M, and I do think that still really could happen. Might as well just move it to Dallas.
Or if you want, I mean, if you want to be truly neutral, since you've added Missouri, Oklahoma, A&M, and Texas to this league, the New Orleans Superdome makes a whole lot of sense. I
Yeah,
guess it's the Mercedes-Benz Dome. That is the most centrally located NFL stadium, if that's where you wanted to move it. Um, you'll have a lot of the original eight or whatever you want to call them politicking to not have it that way. LSU would love to have it in New Orleans for obvious reasons. Um, I see a time now that because the membership has started to shift somewhat east or west, that you're going to see more stadiums in play. One of the interesting things will be what happens with the baseball tournament, which is historically at Hoover, Alabama. Um, there's rain issues every year. It's just that time of year in the
yeah.
South where you have all those things. You've got now three major league stadiums, two which have a dome in the footprint. That'll be interesting to see. And again, we're going to shift closer to Texas, meaning what is it, Daikin now? Daikin Park.
But there's gonna be so many jokes on Pride Night for that too, by the way.
Sure. Daikin Park or the Home Depot that doubles as a baseball field in Arlington. Um,
It's a true value.
all
It's not
credit
even a
where
Home
credit is
Depot, man.
due.
It's a true value. Calm down.
All credit where credit is due. If there is one thing that Texas is excellent at, and I think there's many things that Texas as a university is excellent at, but if there's one thing they can pride themselves on, it is the manipulating the political systems in which they exist.
Fair.
So yes,
I
I
actually
will.
think, from a fan perspective, to your point, you've got plenty of baseball stadiums in that footprint now. You've got plenty of football. I like to see it rotate. I think fans like to go different places. And maybe I'm different. Maybe I'm weird, but I think it'd be cool. Like, oh, one year we're going to go play it in Dallas. One year we're going to play the baseball tournament at Busch Stadium or something, right? Like, to
Yep.
me, I think seeing it move around would make it a much more interesting prospect for fans if they cared about what
Well,
fans want.
I think the other thing that we all fail to recognize when we talk about major league stadiums for the baseball tournament, at least, there is a major league season going on. And so closing off a major league stadium for an entire week isn't undoable, but it's not necessarily the easiest thing to accomplish because primary tenant being the Astros or the Rangers or the Cardinals or the
Yeah.
Braves, you're relying on MLB to play along with you. Now, having said that, in Houston, we managed to push the Astros out for an entire month
1992, baby.
during a time where they really needed some home games
They really
uh,
did. Well, Craig
for a
Biggio's
political
daily
convention.
diary of the travel got real sad in the chronicle by the end.
Yeah, just I miss everything.
I just miss having Bagwell snores. His goatee's getting more ridiculous by the day. I don't know what to do. You're a Christmas movie guy. We should end on some Yuletide
I
stuff.
mean, not like you.
That's
I don't have
true.
I don't have a 70 movie bingo card running on Facebook right now.
It's 100.
Yeah, yeah,
It's 100. I think I'm at 62.
great. And there's still 19 days left.
To be fair, I only have we're leaving for Colorado on the 19th, so I will only maybe I have to have them done pretty much by then. Except for
Make just drive and you can watch like three movies.
right, I'll just although we do our new tradition as a family is we play Monopoly and we start Die Hard so that way Gruber hits the ground at midnight. So we do that whole bit. Um
As you did.
okay, so my big question is and we're talking about random. I'm also a big Christmas Carol guy. I will watch any adaptation. It is my favorite novel. I have a T-shirt that just says Marley was dead to begin with, which is the maybe the greatest opening line of a novel, right along with it was the best of times, the worst of times, so far, and then also obviously Call Me Ishmael for you Moby Dick fans. But do you consider Scrooged an adaptation of A Christmas Carol or a sequel to A Christmas Carol?
I'm in the boat of adaptation
Show your
because
work.
it is, and I know you might have a different opinion, but I think that it's a modern, for what, 1987, modern retelling of that you've moved from a banker to a TV executive, which are equally vapid and kind of disgusting morally. So it works for me. Um, the argument that it's a sequel is that you know what's going to happen because you know what's going to happen because it's all Bill Murray's character, Frank Cross, is self-aware of the Christmas Carol. None of the other, and I get that part of the argument, but none of the other characters, the Muppets, aren't self-aware that there's going to be three ghosts, and we know what's going to happen, and
Right.
oh,
Right.
death is going to show up at the end. And Frank Cross, Bill Murray's character, mentions that a few times during the film.
Sure.
Now, part of my bias is that Scrooged is my favorite adaptation, so I'm willing to
Same.
give it a lot of leeway.
To me, it's Scrooge in the Muppet Christmas Carol. I still consider it a sequel though, only because I think to your point, it's self-aware that the original story already happened, and so at that point, um, I think that there has to be a little bit of leeway in how you interpret it. Same thing. I would say same thing about Spirited, the Will Ferrell Ryan Reynolds movie, which I think is also excellent for people who haven't seen it. All right, I guess as we get ready to get out of here, then, what would be one Christmas wish for your Houston Astros you would like to give them before December 25th?
I mean, Christmas wish.
A
Juan
gift.
Soto's playing left field in Minute Maid Park all of next year.
and then hitting because he's also a left-handed hitter, right?
I don't care. He hits like 500 in our
It's true.
park.
And
And
just
he did
poking
most
it.
of that when he was 21 years old, Jim. He was only 21 or 23. I don't remember.
Yeah,
He'll forever.
but honestly, like I read an article about him yesterday about how like which ballpark. It was one of those roundtable things. Which ballpark would fit him? And Jeff Passan was like, he can hit anywhere. Like, what are you talking about? Like,
Yeah, that's not an issue, but there are certainly, it's always a weird conversation, right? Well, he hits better in our park. Well, yeah, he hits our pitchers well.
yeah, I
I
think
mean,
the only
that's,
I think
I
the
don't
only
think,
park that really suppresses offense is Seattle, and I think there's now enough um, anecdotal evidence to say that that's a thing where people just don't hit well there.
I think to some extent, Chavez Ravine, the Dodgers Park, suppresses offense unless it gets hot.
Maybe,
And
yeah,
by hot, I mean if it's over 85 degrees, the ball flies out of there differently than it does when it's below
right.
80. Um, but yeah, I'm sure that we could pull up all the stats on park factors and all those things and say who plays neutral. But I always think a big part of that is if your pitching staff is shitty, it doesn't really matter what the dimensions of your park are.
Yeah,
If your pitching staff is great, it doesn't really matter. That was the big deal from Astros fan standpoint with Roy Oswalt because our entire rotation we moved into what was then Enron Field was scared to death of that park,
yeah,
and their numbers showed it. Oswalt got called up and basically showed everybody how you pitched in the dimensions of that park. There were some fence changes and some other things, but if you pitch to the biggest part of the park, they can't hit it anywhere. And
yeah.
people have for what 25 years now come in and said, "Oh, we'll just dump things into the Crawford boxes." Well, that's a whole lot
It
easier
doesn't
said
really
than
happen.
done.
Yeah,
No,
no, I mean you're exactly right. Everybody thought that it was just going to become
but
eh,
Jose Lima made them look like this is going to be a factor in every game, and it was when Jose Lima was pitching.
or Shane Reynolds because remember he did not really
Rest
adapt.
in peace.
Right.
Yes, he was not a happy camper in that park either. Hall
Yeah.
of Famer Shane Reynolds because we
Yeah.
don't reach.
Astros Hall of Famer Shane Reynolds. All right. Well, speaking of Hall of Fame, Andy, I think you and I belong. And that is the wrap of our first episode. I thought it went well.
First episode of what? What are we calling this thing?
We don't know yet though. That's the thing. As of right
Yeah,
now, it's still called Jim and Andy's unnamed show. So here's
fair.
what I'm hoping.
I think we go with maybe we open a poll on Blue Sky or something and see if anybody answers.
Yeah, that's a fantastic idea. I will work that
Name the
out.
show contest. We
Name the
will give you.
show.
I've
You're
got a here. You can have by this guy.
That's Roy Kent. You can't give him Roy Kent.
I don't like Roy Kent in the tracksuit. This is Roy Kent as the soccer coach.
Oh, you already have him as you have him in his kit.
Oh, I can. I mean, if you want Astros fans to respond, I just pulled their heads off the bobblehead, so that would tell you the quality of this. But you can have your Bill Brown, Jim DeShay's bobblehead that
I
I
might
have
want
sitting
that.
here.
I'll give up a different one. I want that one. So I will give up. Yeah, we're gonna have a
Say
we
we
will
have prizes.
definitely
We have prizes in the prize closet that could be
yes.
awarded.
And a sturdy high five should we come in should we come in contact. But so hopefully by the time we get back next week, we'll have a name, we'll have a third baseman, and I'm hoping that we have an SEC championship. That seems like a pretty doable. The winter meetings are going to start. Why not?
I hope that some of those things are true. I hope the third baseman is not Jorge Polanco.
I guess I shouldn't be saying. I don't want for third.
Just
I want
a third baseman.
like the third baseman, please.
Yeah, you want a specific third baseman because I can. Shea Whitcomb is technically a third baseman.
So it's not quite Billy Bean. If somebody hits it to third, no one's there to field it. Like there's going to be
Right.
someone there to field it.
Art Howe technically is a third baseman, lives in the Houston area, I believe, and would probably love a major league minimum paycheck.
And honestly, still pretty good shape, unlike what the movie tried to depict him as.
I love Philip Seymour Hoffman, and I think he's a great actor. I do not understand that casting. I still will never understand that casting.
No, it's grudge casting. I mean, I think they knew exactly what they were doing because not only did they do the casting like they did, but I'd seen, as you had seen Art Howe in a lot of interviews, I'd never seen him behave anywhere like he behaved as he was depicted in that movie.
Well, no, you're telling the story from Michael Lewis's and Billy Bean's standpoint, so I get that part of it.
Yeah.
But it's in general, I think if you're making a film, and I'm
I
not a
agree.
filmmaker, certainly not to your level, if you're going to cast somebody there should be some at least physical closeness to the actual person who's still alive.
Preaching to the choir. You're preaching to the choir on that one, but
Philip
that's what
Seymour
we do.
Hoffman could have played me. We're of a similar body type.
That's factually incorrect. All right, next we'll add a
Well, no, because he's dead and his body type is completely different.